Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 207. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace, fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heathen folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard, the cry of those ye humor, are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly profit laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give or wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
That was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Please do go and check out his YouTube channel. Really good musician and one of our friends. Okay, hopefully this evening we should be on X live as well as here. So if someone in the chat would like to tell me if we're live on Twitter or on X, I should be most grateful. Good evening to my guests, Hitman and Atman. How are you going today, boys?
Hello, Iron Duke. Great to be back on again.
You're always very welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh yeah, good, Armin. Davey in the chat saying that sounded remixed. Did Chris Gard do that for you? No, he didn't. He didn't do it specifically for me, but he gave me permission to use it. So there we go. But yeah, it's his own original music and singing. And yeah, I think Panama Hat did the arrangement or something like that. I don't know. Tells you. Did tell you. All right, guys. Did we have a first subject for this evening, Hitman?
Yes, I want to discuss the Germany and the AfD.
Go for it.
Because what's happened? Yeah, because for those who follow Eugipius on X, Twitter, yeah, an absolutely bombshell event happened. So in the last week, so in modern German politics, the AfD, there's a cordon sanitaire where all the other parties refuse to work with them. And if there's a vote that would only pass with AfD support, the party in question would rather kill the bill than let it pass with AfD support. That list last week has been broken because the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, Germany's main centre-right party and the most likely party that will get to form a government after the election, they passed an anti-migration bill and it passed the Bundestag vote with AfD votes, and the left are absolutely going apeshit over this. And what this has actually led to is the possibility that now, because the left are now saying that they will not work with the CDU in a potential coalition, because obviously if CDU were going to keep the call on sanitaire not work with the AfD, then most likely government would have been a grand coalition between the CDU and the SPD. But now the left are saying they won't work with the CDU. The only option now is to work with the AfD, either in a formal coalition or through probably something like a supply and confidence deal, as with the Sweden Democrats in Sweden. So, yeah, I mean, that's obviously great for Germany that the AfD have been finally allowed some influence in the political system, and then they've not. But what's trouble ahead is the left have actually tried to pass a motion to actually try and formally ban them now. From what I've seen, that hasn't passed, but I would need to double check because that would be a very extreme move if that does happen.
Yeah, I saw Eugipius had posted it. I think it was Eugipius posting about the protests against the CDU by leftists because of the CDU working with them. But like I mean, how sort of like politically immature are these people? Like, did they just expect the CDU to just roll over and die? Like, of course they're going to look for political allies, and if no one to the left of them is going to do it. I mean, it's kind of stupid as well because most of us are kind of usually of the mindset that like the center right will side with the left against the real right. Generally speaking, that's what happens. And of course, the left has always had this sort of inverse theology to that, where they said that actually, like the liberals and everyone to the right of that will side with the far right against actual leftists. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what this whole thing's been overblown. But it doesn't. Like they've almost like huffed their own farts to such an extent now that they actually believe that, and they actually are combative to everyone, to the right of the most insane of political positions within the German polity. It's quite bizarre to watch.
Well, one thing I will say is I think one of the only reasons this has actually happened is because of Musk's support for the AfD. Again, for Friedrich Merz, the leader of the CDU, he's a former employee of BlackRock, and so he's very much, I think, part of the regime, so to speak. And I think he's seeing the writing on the wall, and I don't think that essentially he's seeing the vibe shift with what Trump's doing, and I think he's trying to get on board with it ultimately.
I think we must hope so. That that Trump is going to lead to a wider shift in politics. I mean, I'm hoping Le Pen will do better in France this time. I noticed, incidentally, one of her relatives' graves was, who died last month, was smashed to pieces by leftists.
It was her father's grave.
Yeah, just yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine if the right was to go around smashing, I don't know, graves of communists or socialists? You can imagine it would be headlines everywhere, but of course, no one covers that because smashing up right wingers' graves is perfectly okay.
I mean, all I'll say is Le Pen didn't exactly have a great relationship with her dad. She saw him as an embarrassment and even kicked him out of the party. So,
Yeah, true. I'm sure she didn't want his grave to be smashed to pieces, mind you. But
no, fair. Yeah, but I'm just
yeah.
providing that context.
I mean, the other thing I would say that when you talk about the AFUD, AFU, and what have you, is that you get some people on the right who will just criticise them. The same sorts of people who will criticise Trump, who will criticise, sometimes rightly, Farage and reform. It's like nothing is ever good enough. When at the moment we're seeing it just getting worse and worse and worse all the time. While we're run by people like Starmer,
Well, some people just want to black pill. They just want to, never win. They just want to impotently just, they want to black pill so they can say, well, I told you I was right.
Yeah, so they can in the background. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't do me any good. I just find it. If these people who say, "Oh no, we can't do anything about this," and anything that does happen is merely containment, they just get on my nerves. They really do. They're just negative about absolutely everything you can possibly do. And I'm not saying we shouldn't criticize people on the right, because I certainly think we should be able to do that. But I think you should try and do it in a constructive manner, shall we say.
No, certainly.
What's your view on that, Armin?
I think that there's a lot of people out there who, I used to be really critical of when people on the right would call other people on the right grifters, or anyone would call people on the right grifters, because I used to kind of sit there and think, well, if you wanted to grift, you'd just go and be a leftist, right? You'd just go and be one of these bread tubers that puts out.
You certainly wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
No, you'd go and crank out 3 videos a year. You'd turn into a troon. You'd crank out 3 videos a year, and you'd not necessarily rake in the cash, but you'd do all right for yourself.
Yeah. 100.
And yeah, sorry.
So I was going to say, speaking of grifters, this is a little bit off topic, but did you see the video clip of Bernie Sanders at RFK's confirmation, and RFK just exposing that Bernie took nearly $2 million in donations from pharmaceutical companies?
Oh,
yeah,
that.
That was excellent. I did see that. Yeah, that was excellent. And he was one of these people, along with the Pocahontas woman, who was giving RFK a really hard time at his hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen. I mean, that's another thing, of course, is we've seen a lot of people sort of coming up on the right, maybe over the last year, where they've been coming out and saying like, oh, well, actually, we need to ally with like the real leftists, and they'll point to people like Bernie Sanders, or they'll go on about trade unions back in the day. And I remember looking into the whole trade union thing, and like, even if you go back as far as the Race Relations Act, maybe if you go back a lot further than that, maybe it is different. But I went back as far as the Race Relations Act, and they were still just like regime stooges all the way through. So I kind of have a feeling that people are kind of applying very sort of rose-tinted spectacles to this sort of thing. I think some people, when they talk about how like the left has been embarrassed in the last like 20 years, where they've been sort of absorbed into this sort of, which is like, woke and that, I think there's definitely something to that. But I also think that a lot of them are quite happy to go along with this stuff. But
yeah. I mean, look, I would say, because I'm older, I can remember this bit. If you went back to, say, the 70s in Britain, there were still traditional trade unionist type people around then, who were sometimes just trying to get a better deal for their workers.
Yeah,
which is what they were for originally.
Yeah, usually like you see this. There's this paper you can look up called "Mind the Values Gap," and it's like a Remain versus Brexit thing. But they show how like politicians are like sort of to the left of the general public on a number of issues, and there's a bit where they show politicians at all these different levels, and it's like if you go down to like the council level, like Labour councillors are actually far to the left of the party, and Tory councillors are actually far to the sorry, both are to the right of the party, and then as you go further up, they sort of skew left. I kind of feel it's probably the same way with unions. If you went into unions back in the day, when you enter on the ground floor, there's probably a lot of very proactive, very actual, like true believers in the idea of like workers' rights or worker organization. And then as you go further and further up, like the mechanisms sort of corrupt them more and more, and they just sort of skew off.
100%. 100%. I'll give you an example from Australia when the China virus was at its height, and where I live, we had the longest lockdowns in the world, and a lot of the tradie guys were really getting fed up with this because they couldn't earn any money to feed their families, so they did a massive march, and the Victorian Labour Party set the anti-terrorist police on them with armoured vehicles and tear gas and rubber bullets. I'm not exaggerating. And the unions just shout on their members. The top union guys just shout on their members, locked up their offices. It was amazing to see. So you had the Labour Premier of Victoria, scumbag Dan Andrews, who everyone called Dictator Dan, who now is retired, I'm happy to say. You had him saying the anti-terrorist police on trade union guys, and their own leadership shitting on them. It was just,
Yeah, and there's some really good examples from the States in that James Burnham book. I can't remember if it's Managerial Revolution or the Machiavellians, but there's a whole bit where he goes for like 2 chapters just talking about these different examples from trade union activity over there, where he says
I think it would be Managerial Revolution because Machiavellians is him summarizing the elite theorists. So
it must be that one. But yeah,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say at the end of the stream, guys, I will be getting Hitman to talk about his channel a bit because he's been covering some of these books and what have you on his channel. So yeah, sorry, carry on, guys.
Well, yeah, and it's just I mean, maybe if you go back really, really far, you do find that. I remember, since you brought up Panama Hat at the beginning, I remember there's a stream somewhere where Panama Hat a while back mentioned that, like, he was talking about, I think it's Bakunin, and he's like, oh, if you scratch one of these old anarchists, you kind of find the bleeding heart reactionary underneath. And I think he's probably right about that on some of those older guys.
Some of them, yeah, some of them. I mean, as you say, Adam, and it's also true though that a lot of, especially the more senior guys and like MPs and so on, it was the minority, even in the 70s, of the left who were nationalistic.
Another
some
point
were, but it wasn't the majority by any means.
Another point I want to make up is obviously I mentioned Sanders there being a grifter. It's interesting because I remember back around 2017, people were saying, well, Bernie and Corbyn are like, the Anglo-American socialist bros, and it's just, if now I think about it, that it's so absurd though to compare them, because Corbyn, even though he's a leftist, he's still a true believer in socialist values. And he would never do what Bernie did. He would never take that money from a pharmaceutical company.
Sanders has got 3 big houses, I believe, like 3 big mansion type houses. Very socialist.
Yeah, but what my point is that Corbyn at least seems more like a true believer in he's relatively modest. He doesn't go around flashy with big massive houses. You know what I mean? Whereas Sanders, it's just like a grifter. He just says stuff because he thinks it's popular, but he really doesn't care at the end of the day. And he cucked that many times to the Democrats, whereas Corbyn, he was cooed out of Labour, but he fought as hard as he could. He didn't just cuck to them.
And as someone said in the chat, it's mostly because of his positions on Zionism. So
yeah, like he I mean, that was kind of funny to see at the time how that party just imploded over that sort of like 2-year span. Not over any of his domestic policy ideas, but purely over his positions on a country on the other side of the Mediterranean. It kind of shows how politics is. But he didn't. I mean, I can't remember sitting there the whole way through thinking, dude, just lie, just say you don't believe these things, and then just carry on as normal. But of course, I don't know if this is him being shrewd, or maybe this is just him being like sticking to his values to a fault. But there is an aspect, you've kind of seen this with reform a little bit here lately. There is an aspect to which if you play the rhetoric game for too long, lots of people within your party and your movement just kind of end up believing it, and you kind of end up making that the party line.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. Did you guys see the burning of the Quran today?
Oh God.
Yeah, and the bit that many people are not showing is immediately afterwards he was standing there with an Israeli flag.
And that's all I saw was just a guy with an Israeli flag, thinking, what Quran burning? All I see is some Zionist.
But the point is, some people on X, on Twitter, for example, were putting out posts of him burning the Quran and saying it was based, but they didn't point out that he then stood there with an Israeli flag, which, kind of made me lose all sympathy for him, to be honest, because I wish Britain and other countries could stay out of Middle Eastern wars,
I'm just reminded of that quote you said, Ataman, from Panama Hat, about scratching an anarchist and finding a reactionary. Well, scratch a counter-jihadist and you'll find a Zionist.
Yeah.
Very often, yes, very often. You. This is my one criticism of Tommy Robinson, is that he's so obviously a Zionist shield. Look who supports him. I mean,
yeah,
and Pajit shill.
Yeah,
and to some degree that too. Yeah, absolutely.
And
but
of course, you had the Christmas
with him.
market attacker in Germany as well. Like, he just turned out to be a massive Zionist. You go on his Twitter and it was just all throughout.
Crazy. Yeah, I mean, Blighter tells the truth here, I think, to some degree.
Yeah.
I think there's a good deal of truth in that, Blighter.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you guys think of the big in support of Tommy Robinson march today, which I noticed Carl Benjamin went to?
I mean, I like Carl, but I just wish he wouldn't stop supporting Tommy, because it's just so obvious that he doesn't hold our country's interests in his mind first.
Yeah, no, I'd have no problem at all with Tommy Robinson if he wasn't a Zionist shill. And he is, and you could watch video cuts of him saying how wonderful Israel is, and look at the people who back him. I mean, Rebel News, etc.
Yeah, what also annoys me is that Sargon is becoming more and more pro-reform, and he's shown annoyance that Farage won't invite Robinson in. Is that, yeah, but it's a very good reason why Farage won't do that.
I think so too. If I was Farage, I wouldn't invite Robinson in, but then I also wouldn't invite Carl Benjamin in either, really. I mean, look, he wasn't exactly a good thing for UKIP back in the day, was he?
No.
I mean, I liked
everywhere now.
What was his name? Gerard Batten. I quite like Gerard Batten, but I think inviting Sargon in was a mistake.
Yeah.
On his part.
Yeah, the sort of thing where sort of small or up and coming parties sort of want to seem to chase like the clout of e-celebs is kind of it's cringe. It always seems like a massive dead end as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't mind Lotus Eaters. I vary a bit on my mileage with the different guys on there. I mean, obviously, I like Bo. I think he's a pretty good dude. You know, history bro. I've streamed with him a couple of times. I like what's his name, Connor. I think he's all right. But I vary with some. I also quite like Dan, but I don't know why they're spending most of the time criticizing Farage and Reform at the moment. That doesn't.
I mean, I get
strike me
some
as
of their
being-
criticisms, but I don't understand why Carl's been told over and over again what the issues are with like Robinson, and he just still comes out as his like most staunch defender. And it's funny because you'll see Carl start to move on a little bit towards getting a more full understanding of some of these issues, you know. And like there was a bit actually that really peed me off with him. He went on Oran McIntyre, who I stream with him, which I really like Oran McIntyre's content.
Yeah, me too.
And he went on there to talk about the you know, the grooming gangs, as I'll call them. But of course he kept focusing down on this issue of like Muslims, it being some sort of cultural religious issue, and just completely, like, I thought we'd moved on with this conversation to somewhere actually a lot more positive, you know, in actually understanding the sort of ethnic and sort of racial animus that fuels a lot of this stuff. And he's just sort of like, he's on there just to this American audience, just like pushing the conversation back again to like 2012. It's like, oh, come on, dude, Jesus Christ. And yeah, that peed me off quite a bit. And it's like, just as you see him like moving on a little bit with this stuff, like Tommy Robinson will come back into the headlines again, and he just sort of resets to like the good old days where he was you know, trying to run as a UKIP MEP.
Yeah, I as someone said in the chat, Carl Benjamin has definitely gotten better over time, but it's like for every 2 steps he takes forward, he takes 1 step back. And he to me he's still a small L liberal in most respects.
Yeah.
It's which I've never been. I've never been a small L liberal, really. I don't think I was that when I was 20. But yeah, like I said, I like some of the Lotus Eater stuff. Some of his criticism of Farage is valid, but some of it isn't. And he could be more positive about it. You know, and if and at the moment, Farage and Reform are the only game in town. You know, there is not another political party. I mean, people talk about Homeland and all that, but Homeland are not even planning to run MPs at the next general election. They've never known anything else. So, you know, and I saw someone earlier said that local politics are more effective, and I'm not against people doing local politics stuff. Good on you if you want to. But one of the things I suppose we should mention is Labour want to cancel half of the British English elections that are due this year, like council elections, and the Conservatives, in air quotes, are siding with them because it suits them as well, because they're scared of losing lots of their councillors to Reform.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the way Labour's planning on reforming local politics is effective in that it's a good starting position to build up a base in a certain area, so you can then go on to getting national level politicians elected in certain areas. This is actually the Homeland strategy. But of course, the problem is that local politics, I suppose it depends on what your outlook is. If you think we're facing some imminent collapse, then local politics is really, really useful. Getting people organized on a local level is the way to go. But I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen. So I also kind of think that the limitation of local politics is that it's still subservient to Parliament, which remembers its sovereign all of a sudden when you try to do something it doesn't like.
Yeah, when it suits them.
Yeah, so like I mean, obviously I'm in Kent, right? When David Cameron won, and he finally put away, oh god, what was that? What was the Thatcher rule on sex education in school? Was it section 9?
Oh, that's section 87, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that was actually no, it was Blair who did that, but Cameron is the one who pushed through gay marriage.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so when Blair did it, I'm trying to remember the timeline properly now. I think when Blair rescinded it, Kent County Council actually ignored it being rescinded, and they just sort of unofficially kept it on the books. Richard Phillips, section 28. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And then of course when David Cameron won, the government just turned around and actually stopped Kent County Council from doing that. They sort of forced the issue through. You can see it in housing development. You can see it all sorts of things. Parliament remembers it's sovereign when it wants to.
You were saying, Adamant, I think, that the way Labour wants to reform the English councils, they really want to make them into big regional things, don't they?
Yeah, it'll be like up in the north. You get these things where it's like mayor of the northeast or the East Midlands and stuff like that.
Nonsense like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like putting a Sadiq Khan in every region. Is basically the idea.
Probably what it'll end up being as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they're trying to do to the rest of the country, and that will sort of nullify most local politics. There's this particularly famous photo of there's this particularly famous photo, and it's in Birmingham, I believe, or it might be Wolverhampton, and it has like a rundown factory. It looks like it's been bombed. It looks horrific. Like a small sort of factory or warehouse type building of some description, and then there's like a banner in front of it, and it's got running for the mayor of the East Midlands, the West Midlands, and it's got that guy who's like the Muslim lawyer, the famous Muslim lawyer who was going to represent the two from the Manchester airport, and it says like "Vote for me" is a vote for Palestine or something.
Oh yeah, that is total like ashes of civilization.
Yeah. And it completely shows that like Britain is just entirely just an economic zone that just exists at the behest of foreign interest groups, and that's what that sort of political organization inculcates to a massive degree. In my local politics, people still do talk a lot about local issues like traffic and local planning issues and stuff like that. And this would kill off whatever's left of that and just replace it with the same sort of crap you see everywhere. Just ethnic tribal concerns from abroad.
Well, I mean, I watch posts on Twitter, on X, quite frequently that will show you the mayor of Brighton or the mayor of somewhere in Birmingham or wherever, and it's this little Asian dude who looks like Ali Baba with the old Victorian alderman stuff on,
Oh, you won't believe it. I was happening on Wikipedia earlier to be looking up Justin Welby, the disgraced resigned former Archbishop of Canterbury, and you want to know one of the accolades of Justin Welby?
Go for it.
He's responsible for appointing the first black female bishop in England, Rose Hudson Wilkin, the Bishop of Dover.
Great. Well, she's in the right place in Dover. She can welcome all the
we can easily remigrate her.
Yeah, she can welcome all the illegal economic migrants. It's just an amazement to me that we can't give old people their winter fuel allowance, people who've paid tax all their lives, but we can give free mobile phones, free accommodation in three-star hotels, money, free healthcare, etc., and they jump the queues in the healthcare, etc., to all these economic migrants. It's insanity. If this was a sane country, people would just be appalled by this and it wouldn't happen.
When she first took up her post in Dover, she came into the Marks and Spencers in Canterbury and complained that too many of they had these big signs on the wall in the women's section that were women like models in lingerie. And she went in there and complained that too many of them were white.
And presumably not vastly overweight.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's clown world, guys. It just is. You have to laugh at it because otherwise you'll cry. But yeah, I do agree with what Alan's saying. I mean, the Labour plans for the councils are entirely bad, and Farage is entirely correct in calling this out and asking people to complain about it. But I doubt it's going to do much good.
Interesting. I'm also reading more about that woman, Atterman, and it says here that she thought the issue of racism was more important in the church than in homosexuality, which, well, of course she'd think that now, wouldn't she?
Yeah, well, particularly because homosexuality is just one in the Church of England completely, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and of course, another part of the changes as well is that they're going to make it vastly easier for local authorities, or presumably just the government at that point, to push through housing developments, because it's going to be more centralized in how the planning is sort of put forward and then either accepted or rejected. So, and of course, the funny thing about that is that when you bring this up as a criticism and you just say, well, no, I don't want them to just concrete over everything for more housing. We may have a housing issue, but that's a product of immigration.
Yep.
The people that sort of are defending them, they'll turn around and they'll say, well, you know, these people were voted in on the provision that they were going to get the housing under control, as if it's like a monkey's paw, right?
Yeah.
And you had to be careful what you wished for. When it's not a monkey's paw, it's just a human hand slapping you across the face repeatedly. You know, there's no like be careful what you wish for or any other such whimsical metaphor here. It's literally just no, you're getting X. We'll play rhetorical tricks to get it, and if we can't play the rhetorical tricks, we'll just punch you in the face and do it anyway.
I mean, how many promises has Starmer gone back on already? I mean, you know, he's basically all of the Labour manifesto. He's torn it up.
I mean, Starmer for me is the embodiment of that famous Orwell quote. You know, imagine a human face being stamped on by a boot forever.
Yeah. 100%, absolutely 100%.
I think the real tragedy as well
is. Sorry, carry on, Alan.
I was just going to say, I think the kind of tragedy of Orwell is that it's been so. His points have been so done to death at this point. When you bring him up to like regular people, you kind of almost see people roll their eyes. But a lot of what he has to say is kind of been a lot easier to sort of see in real time now than it probably was even when it was written or in the 20 or 40 years that came after.
Yeah, he's not subtle. Two-tier. Two-tier care is not subtle at all. It's like Farage is correct, because to give him his due, he did a tweet today, I think, where he said Britain doesn't have a housing crisis, it has a mass immigration crisis, which is entirely true. The only reason there aren't enough houses in Britain is unending enormous mass third-world immigration. And wasn't for that, we wouldn't have a housing crisis.
And I don't know, did either of you watch Morgoth's appearance on Millennial from last year?
Yes, I did, but I don't remember much of it now.
From this Christmas just gone, or the one before that?
Oh, no,
I haven't seen the most recent one.
Yeah, well, it's just that he brought up something in that stream of woes, which is really scary, which is that obviously with planning permission and house building, you obviously got green belt, brown belt, etc. Well, they're planning on bringing in a new one called grey belt, and grey belt is basically green belt, but it's green belt that's got like some old like obstruction on it. So let's say you've got like a bit of like land, but it's got like an old windmill on it or something. That's classed as grey belt, which means you can now build on it. So great, they're just going to use that to just. So imagine you're now going to have this apartment complex in the middle of nowhere because it's designated as grey belt, which is accommodation for Somalis in the backwoods of Yorkshire or something.
And of course, that's in addition to the farmland which the government wants to cover with wind farms and solar panels, and all of which are enormously inefficient. Apart from the wind farms, of course, kill tens of thousands of birds every year, and also bats. And the areas covered in solar panels are completely uninhabitable for any wildlife whatsoever. Like, a cornfield is better for wildlife than that.
Yeah, they tried to get a solar farm built near me that was absolutely gigantic. But we ended up getting them to reduce it down quite substantially. It's just on like essentially half a field now. But I remember there was this yogurt advert. I can't remember where it's from. I think it was American, but it was for some Danish brand. And the lefties like loved it. Dave the Distributist actually did a speech on it at I think one of the American Skildings events that's on YouTube.
So for the Old Glory Club, yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I think it was the Skildings, but yeah, now it's OGC. And they were doing this whole sort of like what do they call it, like solar punk, and they had this imagery of like cows in the shade under like solar panels and stuff like that. And like these people all living around. And the funny thing with those solar farms that no one really talks about is that because obviously they're quite expensive and they have all sorts of wiring and electronics hooked up to them, they're locked down. They are sort of secure facilities. It may look like a field
surrounded by barbed wire fences and stuff.
Yeah. Usually very tall fences. Any footpaths that go through them either need to be moved, or it just gets turned into this like tunnel between fences that you have to walk down. They're not actually very nice things to live around.
No, and I can tell you for a fact, Hammond, because like apart from history and this sort of stuff, the other thing that I've always been very into is wildlife and bird watching and all that kind of stuff. They are terrible for wildlife. There's almost no animals can live near them. Like even the earthworms can't really live under solar panels.
Yeah,
because there's no organic matter for them to eat.
Yeah, it ruins the soil as well.
Well, yeah, partly because it kills the earthworms and all the other microbiology in the soil,
No, and just to add to what you said, Atom, and about that video from Dave, I've seen that, and I remember in that video as well, because it was like an animation, there was a lot of diversity amongst the various characters in that video as well.
Yeah, a lot of single mums as well. What's that about? They're implying like it's the modern Amish community, and it's
that's the other one I wanted to talk about very briefly, guys. Did you know Trump has got this cute lady who's his front lady?
Yeah,
yeah, she's a very cute blonde girl. And the Daily Mail, for example, are on Twitter slagging her off, claiming she looks like what's that restaurant in America? Hooters. She looks like a Hooters waitress, which she doesn't. But
what?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Daily Mail, which when it suits the Daily Mail, they'll put scantily clad pictures of celebrities all over their newspaper. But apparently, she mustn't look cute.
Oh, for God's sake! I mean, I just remember her confirmation hearing, and I think, as the OGC covered it, and it's like, buddy, that overweight, like Mazie Hirono, like Democrat senator, was the one like briefing her, and it's just like, what? How on earth? What's wrong with you, Daily Mail? It's like she looks way more attractive than all the other like overweight, disgusting like Democrat politicians, like Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, she's a cute blonde girl. I mean, I'm totally in favor of cute blonde girls myself, but it's like, and it's true. Right-wing women are almost always more attractive than left-wing women. It's possibly why they're right-wing. I don't know.
Oh God! Yeah. It just reminds me. What was it? Was it Vogue? You had like the woman on the front of it like 5 years ago was like this just overweight woman, and it was just so disgusting.
Yeah.
In her underwear, it was like, oh, what's sick society? Sick.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird. But yeah, I thought that was just worth a brief mention because the left just hates beauty. They do, which is partly why they're happy to concrete over all of the countryside and all the rest of it, or put solar panels and wind farms on them because they don't care about beauty. They don't understand beauty, I suspect.
Well, no, because they're fanatic egalitarians. They can't accept the idea that some people are more attractive than others, so that has to be destroyed.
Yep. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you see, they always rail against golf courses a lot. And it's kind of weird because they kick off about what golf courses represent, which is this play place for the rich people, and they have all these weird claims about how whatever 15% of the British countryside is actually golf courses, which is not remotely true.
I'm sure it's vastly exaggerated.
And they're like, oh, we should build houses on them for these sorts of people or those sorts of people. It's like, okay, so you'd rather take a golf course, this beautifully manicured piece of land with, all sorts of wildlife living on it, and turn it into like a slum shanty town for more
and golf
Pakistani
courses.
immigrants.
Most golf courses have little woodland areas and what have you because they're good to. They're a challenge for the golfers, that they don't want their ball to go in there. And those bits of woodland, etc., as Armand rightly says, they encourage wildlife. And it's the same with the vast majority of farmers. Most farmers will leave some hedgerows and some bits of wood on their land, and those encourage wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, I don't play golf, but I do live quite close to the golf course where Ian Fleming used to go and play, actually. And yeah, I wouldn't remove it for the world. It's got footpaths to go across it. It is a nice place to go and walk, whether you play or not.
Yep. Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I mean, I'd rather see a golf course than a wind farm or a solar panel farm. That's for sure.
Yeah, or another housing estate for immigrants or even for dinos.
I agree with Steve here. He's entirely correct. But anyway, I think the future for cute blonde girls is a very good idea. It's a very good idea for white people in general, actually. Did you have a first subject for this evening, Armand?
No, I did not actually.
Unless, of course, Hitman had anything else to say about the AFD.
No, just that. Obviously, it's interesting, and it's not all doom and gloom in Germany. They'll hopefully get a sensible government.
When is their election? It's early February, isn't it? Oh, okay.
Well, it's this month now, actually. Yeah. Hang on. Actually, let me check the exact date then, because it's one moment.
I think it might be like 16th or something.
I'll have to look at getting someone like Egyptius on.
The 23rd of February.
23rd, right.
The date near that one, I'll have to look at trying to get someone like Egyptius on as a special guest.
Yes, it's 3 weeks and tomorrow.
So if either of you guys know him on Twitter, then you might want to hit him up and say he would be welcome to join one of our streams just before or just after that election.
Another person you might try is Monophalmus. He's also German.
100. I'm open to suggestions, Hitman. If you want to suggest someone to me, for sure, you can talk to me on the Discord later on. But yeah, I'm open to anyone who's a German guy, if around that stream. In the same way that I want to get Endeavour back on when the Canadian election eventually comes up.
Yeah, I know Eugippius is quite. You said about them possibly getting banned earlier. Eugippius has always been quite sure that you couldn't ban the AFD. I think he has gone into the specifics around how because obviously it's like a federalized system, how they're voting on such things would work. But I mean, I hope he's true. I hope he's right.
Yeah, I hope he's right too. I mean, the thing is, once they start banning political parties, they're on a very slippery slope, which brings me on to another thing I wanted to bring up. You guys probably noticed that the BBC, the Biased Brainwashing Corporation, did a hit piece on what they call patriotic alternative. which was really weird because they were just nice to the undercover BBC guy. Like he didn't. He claimed not to have a job, and they offered to get him one.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. I always try to avoid them, but yeah, I heard about that. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I only heard about it, but people were pointing out that this undercover biased brainwashing corporation dude, joined them and claimed he was unemployed and blah and blah. No doubt because that's what the BBC think these people are. And far from being nasty to him, the several people said, "Look, if you want a job, mate, we'll get you a job."
Well, apparently before he'd actually mentioned anything, they just kind of looked at him and just assumed he was down on his luck.
Yeah, yep.
But I remember, I mean, it's so rat-like. But bearing in mind that PA is like a minuscule organization. Like,
yes.
The moment I stopped proactively looking at anything they did, I just kind of forgot they existed. But when Channel 4 did a piece on them a while ago, I think it was Channel 4, I think it was Dispatches, and there was a bit where they were like in the trailer and the presentation for the program, they were trying to imply that like, PA brings violence to our streets, and they were showing their reporter getting beaten up. And then if you actually watch the Dispatches episode, it was actually leftists going out to where PA were canvassing to go out and beat them up.
It was Antifa, wasn't it? That was doing this, not patriotic alternative at all. And look, don't get me wrong, I have my criticisms of the dude who runs Patriotic Alternative, but I'm not going to slag him off. I don't totally agree with him on things, but and I think he's been a bit foolish in some of the things he said, but it's just ironic to me that they try and do a mole operation, in this organization, and the guys were actually nice to him. There was no reason really to slag them off at all.
Yeah, and he spent ages in there, like absolutely forever in there. And he's like, "Did you know the people in this far right racist party are racist?" Like, yeah, okay, brilliant coverage there, sir. Fantastic job.
Every human in the world is racist.
Here's a journalism award.
It's astounding journalism.
Every human of every race, color, and creed in the world is to some degree racist, and always has been.
Yeah.
But the only time you can't talk about it is if it's in relation to, say, the grooming gangs. You can't say that's anti-white racism, even though a very large proportion of the grooming gang story, and I say grooming gangs, people know exactly what I mean. It's child rape and torture gangs, actually. There's a great deal of anti-white racism involved in that.
Yeah, and of course the thing is that if you go and read most of the literature produced by various government departments on racism, systemic racism in the system, like in the police force or anything like that, it's all based on, it's just disparate impact all the way through. It's just like, oh, we found a difference in outcomes between these two groups, must be racism. Which of course is absurd because they don't follow it anywhere else. No one's saying, blacks are overrepresented in strikers in football, but underrepresented in goalies. Therefore, there must be some secret cabal of goalkeepers that seeks to keep black people out. It's and of course, similarly, they won't apply it in any of these cases when it works against native Brits or white people generally. If even when you've got actual compelling evidence, when you've got like literal testimonies of what people have said on the books, that's not enough to go on to say it is explicitly anti-white in some way. It's absurdist. And of course,
even if you rape and kill someone who's white, it's not enough.
Yeah. I mean, the subject I was thinking about bringing up tonight, but I didn't, is the podcast awards, the political podcast awards that have taken place.
I had no idea, dude.
Yeah, I couldn't. I wasn't going to bring it up because I couldn't find a list of a comprehensive list of who'd won what. But basically, there were these podcast awards that went on, and it's all regime stuff. It's all like there's a whole list of podcasts apparently that are called like The Rest Is something or other. So you got like The Rest Is History with Tom Holland. The Rest is Politics with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, and there's like a dozen others. And people have been talking about how, like, why it is that the British establishment kind of rules the roost in podcast land. There's not really many independent voices, and I think there are, but like someone said a little bit above in chat, they were like, oh, nobody watched that PA thing because it's in the BBC. And of course that's actually kind of true. Like, if you go and look at, like, I saw the viewership figures for Question Time like 20 years ago versus today a while back, and it was shocking how few people watch that now. And it's like, just as people were moving into alternative media spaces, the regime at large kind of had to follow them and take over those spaces. And if you go and listen to them, they come out with all this rubbish where they say that, like, oh, people have changed the way they consume media because of people's fast-paced lifestyle, and missing the point that actually people stopped watching TV because it just became crap, and they were desperately trying to get away from that stuff.
Yep.
And it's just every space that they've tried to go into has then been taken over and utterly filled with just this. It's just the same old media garbage, just sold to you through a new medium.
Exactly.
Louis Theroux's there, everything. It's just the same old.
Same old. And let's not forget people like the Russian dude and the fat English bloke, chubby English bloke. What are they called? I can't remember now.
Oh, bloody trigonometry.
Trigonometry, yeah.
Well, kissing's not properly Russian, if you catch my meaning. So.
Yes, I entirely do. And his father was some sort of Russian oligarch who fled Russia because Putin was going to throw him in jail, basically, for corruption. But yeah, okay.
And I just wanted to add something, Adam. You were talking about this idea of race in Britain, and all of these minorities claim racism. Well, it's interesting because obviously with the sentencing of Ruda Bakana for his disgusting murder of the 3 English girls, he was given 52 years, and most people said that's way too low. You should, be given a much harsher sentence. And Tutik here obviously, no, we can't possibly do that. I'm like, oh yes, a great way to deflect people's concerns that you're on his side by shooting that down.
I think he should have been executed, frankly. But
yeah, I agree. But that's the thing, because then the idea of the death penalty was being discussed in the media, and I remember this Indian woman was on the BBC saying, "Oh no, we shouldn't bring back the death penalty because it's racist, because it would be disproportionately kill minorities." I'm like, wow, what a way to say the quiet part out loud there.
Yeah. Oh, they can't help themselves. Like even down to Starmer's comment, it's like, dude, you don't have to say anything. Like, just because people are talking about this, you can just ignore it. But they just have to be in there, like trying to take over the discourse every way they can, and they just shoot themselves in the foot over and over again. They're just constantly standing on rakes all the time.
Well, it's like what's his name? Idris Elba, the black actor. He pointed out some systemic white racism. Knives are sharp, That's systemic white racism, and the only way we can do reparations for this is to make all our knives blunt.
Well, I didn't watch that, but when someone told me it was on, I was like, I said, I'm assuming he's going to bring up Glasgow at some point. They'll always have to head off any discussion about knife crime by bringing up that one time in the past where Glasgow was the knife crime capital of Europe. And I went
razor blades in the peak of your cap in the 1930s. I mean, okay.
I watched a TV show once, and it's like I went back and had a look. I remember sitting there thinking, I'm sure I looked into this before, and the numbers on Glasgow back then are quite hard to find. But
I think it was relatively small numbers, Alan, to be honest.
Compared to today, yeah. If you take it per capita. I'm pretty sure knife crime in Glasgow was only half as bad as knife crime in London is today.
Oh, I'm sure it was even lower than that, to be honest with you. Because back in the day, much of this violence was like gangs on gangs.
Yeah.
If you were a civilian, it didn't involve you,
Yeah, and of course, as I mentioned last week when we had Bodvar on, yeah. The thing with Glasgow as well is there was an ethnic component even there, not a racial one, but there was, of course, massive tensions between Irish gangs or gangs of people that were of Irish descent and Scottish gangs.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, loyalists and Fenians, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you
100%.
still see this with like a Celtic versus Rangers today. I mean, anyone that's watched Peaky Blinders, because you brought up about the razor blades and the caps, you know, the Billy Boys in the Peaky Blinders, their anthem, as was the actual anthem of the actual Billy Boys, they share with with one of the old Rangers Football Club themes.
Yep.
Where it's kind of a bit anti-Irish.
Yeah.
And of course,
Rangers were the loyalist guys, and Celtic were the Fenian guys. 100%.
yeah, and there's a reason you'll never find an SNP politician that's pro Rangers, not ever.
No, you won't. You won't. I mean, look, we've got a couple of good Scots in our Discord, as you know, and these guys, one of whom I think does come from the Glasgow region, points us out all the time. You know, so yeah, it is. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, the SNP is just the Sinn Féinification of Scottish politics.
100%, very much 100%. You're totally correct about that. But yeah, it's you're not allowed to tell the truth anymore. You're not even allowed to tell historical truths anymore. You know, if you do, you in Britain at least, you might get arrested.
Well, this reminds you, there's something Spengler says in Decline of the West. He says that there are facts and there are truths. Facts are what actually happens in reality, actual facts, whereas truths are essentially beliefs, things you claim to be true, though are not necessarily true. And ultimately, this is we live in. We're not allowed to speak facts. You can only speak in these absurd beliefs, essentially.
Yep. Blighter, by the way, is entirely correct that it was gangs in Glasgow giving each other Glasgow smiles, which is cutting people around the mouth. I was going to say, even if you look at London in the 60s, when you had infamous gangs like the Krays and the Richardsons and what have you, they were mostly fighting each other. It didn't really involve civilians much at all, to be honest.
It's like the mafia in America. Like most of the violence was mafia on mafia. It wasn't, they weren't just killing people in the street.
No.
Yeah, I mean the thing as well is back then, if you went back far enough, if a civvy got caught in crossfire, the person who did it would be found and they would hang.
Yep, quite often. Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, another thing about this Idris Elba thing, if you make all knives blunt, right, they've still got to have an edge because, otherwise they can't do what they're supposed to do, which is cut things. And people have things like files and angle grinders, pretty easy to put an edge back on something, or they could use a screwdriver or a chisel, which are sharp and pointy, to stab people. It's ridiculous. If Britain doesn't have a knife crime problem, it has a mass third-world immigration problem. This is where this comes from.
And
a not prosecuting people problem, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to come add on to this, but Starmer's been cozying up to China, and I have to wonder if he's not going to try a Chinese solution to like knife crime, because there was a clip going around of this like Uyghur chef in Xinjiang, the Uyghur part of China, and there the knives are like chained to like the kitchen counter, so like you can't literally take them out of the building. You have to just chop chained to like the counter essentially.
So we could have a Britain where you have to have your knives chained to the counter of your kitchen. Oh my God. I mean, we're already the laughing stock of the world in Britain in many respects. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I just look at Trump in America and all the good stuff he's done in just a week or so. And then I look at Starmer and I'm embarrassed for Britain.
Yeah, Morgus thesis of the woke North Korea gets truer every day.
Oh God, yeah, I was thinking about that earlier.
Yep. Oh, I should say, guys, in the chat, if you want to see the streams that Morgoth's done with us, I put them in a playlist now on the YouTube channel, and there are 3 so far. So if you want to catch the Morgoth streams on this channel for this stream, they're in a playlist.
Nice.
But I mean, you know, I actually said this on a Morgoth tweet in the replies. You know, you can sharpen a pointy, you can make a sharp pointy stick and stab someone with it. You know, there is no way of stopping this.
Yeah, it's
except
like,
for not importing uncivilized people.
well, this is the thing. Like, you could ban guns, and you could do all sorts of funny things with knife regulation. You could do all sorts of stuff, and you could actually probably reduce violent crime to some extent or another. But of course, that's all pointless because they're changing the composition of the population to be more of the stabby variety. So, you know, why change any of it if you're just going to go to all the trouble to import more of these people anyway? But the thing is, as well, is you could completely lobotomize everyone in the country, or nerf them to the point that they're incapable of doing any of these things. But it's like the people doing this, they just, I mean, I actually think it's deliberate and they know what they're doing, but you almost have to wonder if they have no understanding of like second order effects. It's like, you know, we could ban all weaponry. We'll still have all these people walking around with like veiled murderous intent, looking for any opportunity they can, and occasionally one will slip through. But you know, we could also just treat every law-abiding citizen as if they're basically retarded, you know, and incapable
Which is
of
what they do. What they do.
Yeah. So it's.
I'm glad to see Mitch in the chat. A couple of people DM'd me and said, "Where's Mitch?" And I said, "I don't know." But yeah, you're welcome to join us, Mitch, if you would like to. As always, I mean, you know.
I'm in the same boat as Mitch on that. Like, I watched I know you did as well, Duke, the video by Callum of formerly of the Lotus Eaters.
Yes.
On his being arrested by counter-terrorism police when he came back into the country, and I kind of thought, like, I don't know. I don't really want to be here because it does actually worry me. I'm not usually anxious on these sorts of things. I'm usually a bit too easygoing. But you know, I've got some absolute prison worthy memes on my phone, and I haven't even got it passcoded. But I am actually now sitting here thinking, like, is it actually worth staying in the country? The wages are shit, the quality of life shit. It's got bonus points because it is my homeland, and I find a lot of it very beautiful, and its people are my people. But you know, I don't want to have to put up with that sort of treatment. And one of the other funny things as well is that he mentioned in that video is that he said that you're only really compelled to answer those questions or hand over your electronics if you're a British citizen. If you're not,
Yes.
they can simply bar you from entry. Now, I
Yes.
don't know. I've tried to look this up and I can't find a definitive answer on it. Would that mean that if you don't have British citizen, but you do have right to remain, you don't have to be compelled to answer the questions, but also they can't kick you out if you don't?
Guy Incognito makes a good point, and I think Callum made it on that video you're talking about. Get a boner phone if you're going abroad. Like, you're only going to use while you're abroad a cheap, ordinary phone, not a smartphone. So if they take that, I'll let them take it. You know, but I mean, it's. If you'd have said this to me when I was a young bloke in the British Army in the early mid 80s, that Britain would become like a kind of North Korea, I just wouldn't have believed you. Really, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd have said nonsense. And yet here we are, where I think Britain is worse. It's at least as bad as like North Korea and China. And it's certainly worse than Russia.
The only thing we can hope for is, as AM said, we get like a second glorious revolution where Trump helps get rid of Starmer. Or another idea is in the 70s, you had the Clockwork Orange plot, which was the alleged that the CIA and British security state were allegedly trying to remove Harold Wilson because he was perceived as being a Soviet agent. So it'd be interesting if we got something like that happen.
Oh, look, as far as I know, there was quite a lot of evidence that the British Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, was some sort of a Soviet agent, which is why he suddenly retired. But of course, you can't prove it. And you know, Trump's trying to release stuff about JFK and all that at the moment. We'll see how successful he is in that. But the British government are far more, and always have been, far more tight on that stuff than America. You know, there's very little that becomes public in Britain that the government doesn't want to become public.
Howard Wilson always reminded me of is it Hayden from the original Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy?
But
I always imagined when he's in that cell at the end and he's telling him why he did it. I always kind of imagined like Howard Wilson being in a position like that at some point. But
there were very strong rumours that Wilson was some sort of a Soviet spy back then. But
yeah.
Which would never surprise me if you look at the damage he did to the British Armed Forces and the British Empire, for example. He finished off the British Empire. Admittedly, the Conservatives started it in the 50s, but he really finished it in the 60s and destroyed the British Armed Forces.
And don't forget, like, betrayed Rhodesia as well.
Oh, utterly, yeah, 100%. Not that I think the so-called Conservatives would have been a lot better, but
I mean, ultimately it was under Thatcher, you know, the death knell of Rhodesia. So
yeah, and Thatcher also completely surrendered Hong Kong as well. You've got to remember that. But yeah, and she didn't have to, because Hong Kong Island and the Kowloon Peninsula were British forever. It was only the new territories that were leased for 99 years.
Wasn't the implication that it wasn't something you could feasibly hold if?
Look, you couldn't feasibly hold it if the Chinese decided to send their whole army against you, but you could hold it if they didn't do that, for sure.
Yeah, because didn't it fall quite quickly during World War II? Because they just said it's a particularly poor place in terms of defensive potential.
Well, it wasn't so much that. I mean, it was that we only had 5 battalions of infantry there, including 2 new Canadian battalions that hadn't had much training. But there were only 5 battalions of infantry in the place. You know, if you put a good division there with tanks and armored support and what have you, then okay, the whole Chinese People's Army attacks it. You're not going to be able to hold it, of course not. But you could make them do what they need to do to take Taiwan, for example. You know?
Yeah.
Which I think they would be unlikely to do, to be honest. I will just say to Mitch in the chat, Mitch, I've had people asking me what's wrong, mate, and why didn't you come on tonight? I've sent you an invite. So I hope you're okay.
Head on in, Mitch.
Yeah, come in, Mitch. Come in. We need you, mate. We need you.
Join us.
That was from Zulu. We need you, damn it. We need you. when the mounted infantry run away.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, my direct teammate at work has just left this past week. He's moving to Australia. So lots of people I know are leaving.
If you've got experience in trucks, Alan, Australia is not such a bad place, mate, because we have all these big, enormous road trains here that go all over the country, you know, and it's as big as America, basically.
Yeah, house prices out there are crippling, though.
They are very high, but it depends where you live.
Yeah.
If you can live a bit out of the major cities, it improves quite a bit. Also the pay's not terrible if you've got a reasonable job. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking because we were looking at jobs for him. He's going to get his forklift certificate when he gets out there.
Yeah.
And then just find what he can find. I was looking at some of the jobs, and Even for forklift drivers, the pay's not terrible. But I was finding that, like, obviously I work in like customs and like private customs, and I was finding quite a few private customs brokerage firms out there that did quite good pay. So
Yeah,
but
I'd look at that, mate. If I were you, I'd look at it.
yeah, I've got family
I
commitments
look at
here,
it
though,
this
so.
way. I look at it this way. And I've had people slag me off for this. I don't live in Britain anymore, but my son does. And I still vote in British elections. I've still got a British passport. Officially, I own a house in Britain. Officially, but my son lives in it. But you can do these things, you know. And Britain may improve. I mean, I pray to God it does. But at the moment, it's not looking good, I've got to say. Aubrey Alley is saying move to Australia because wombats are adorable. Entirely correct, Aubrey Alley. Wombats are lovely. I do like them very much. But yeah, that video with that guy who got arrested when he was coming back from America. And the thing was, people were telling me, not on our Discord, but on other Discords, that it was because he'd been to Afghanistan. And he actually said, no, they weren't interested in that at all. They didn't care about him going to Afghanistan. They were only really interested in visiting Russia and America. So, yeah, interesting. Bodvar Biaki's in the chat, who was on last week, and I thought was an excellent guest. Good to see you, Bodvar. Go well.
Yeah.
Well, as we're on the subject of, Callum being arrested by the British police, it's interesting that, that they arrested him for going to America, of all places.
Yeah, I know.
Obviously, because, as you know, I did that stream with Semiagog last week on the Anglo-American establishment, and I very much come to the view that I've seen Britain as basically the eye of the storm, the centre of the of the empire, ultimately, considering what's happened. What's your thoughts on that, Iron Duke? How do you agree with that?
Yeah, I like Semiagog. I think he's one of the best American YouTubers. I know he's just got married to a French girl, but then the only good thing about the French is some of their women. But yeah, I thought it was a good stream. And yeah, to me, it's embarrassing, the state of Britain relative to America now that Trump is back. I mean, but if we go back 6 months when senile Biden was in charge, America was at least as bad as Britain, and now it's not. Partly because, to be fair to him, Trump is doing what he said he would do so far, Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, AA has had a comically bad take on Trump's tariffs. He's claiming that, tariffs are something that an empire does when it's in decline. So because Trump's doing it, therefore the American empire will collapse in 20 years. I'm like, hang on, AA. Last year you were saying that if Trump became president, he would save the empire and it would last longer. Whereas if they went with Kamala, that's when it would crash and burn. You can't just about face now like that. Sorry.
Oh, look, you guys will know for a fact, and I hope most of the audience will, that I've always been in favor of tariffs. I think one of the things that Britain and the empire did wrong was they didn't bring in empire tariff preference. I've done a number of streams with Horus on this, amongst other people. I think I did one with you, Alman, as well.
Yeah.
At least one. And, empire tariff preference, which was basically saying anyone who wants to import stuff into the old Commonwealth, which was Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back then also South Africa, would have to pay tariffs. I think it's an entirely good idea. So I'm certainly not going to say that Trump doing that for America is a bad idea. I think it's a good idea, particularly if you want to bring industry back to America, which Trump does.
And the argument is just so like disingenuous because he's arguing, well, Britain went back to tariffs in the 1930s and the British Empire collapsed a couple of decades later, and it's like, no,
Yeah, we
no,
did it too little and too late.
Well, no, like Britain declined and the empire was destroyed for other reasons other than the fact we went with tariffs, for God's sake.
Yeah, I think the Second World War had something to do with it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Winston Churchill, of course. But yeah, it's had there not been a Second World War, or had we managed to stay out of it, like sensible people, that wouldn't have done the British Empire any bad at all. In fact, would have done good. The only people who hated it was the Americans, because it was mainly their goods eventually that we were stopping coming in. And of course, because we owed them money, they were able to force us to get rid of them.
Just a comment from Bodvar, AA is a non, who cares? Well, what does that mean?
But let's not go into that too much, guys. It's YouTube we're on here. But yeah. Good evening, Bolero393. I see you, mate.
Alshire Tory in chats, or Alshire Homelander, I should say, in chat said, not to dampen the mood, but while the tech bros back Trump, you'll get liberalism of old based on merit. It does seem like they want to push it in that direction.
Yeah, it does. But nothing is perfect. You know, especially not in politics. Nothing is perfect.
I mean, you brought up the racist politics earlier, Ataman, but have you guys seen JD Vance absolutely ratioing Rory Stewart on X? That was glorious.
That was really good.
Oh, yeah. Out of those two, I'll take JD Vance anytime. Now, here's a good point from Padfa. Would I invite the Woodlander on in the future? I would be happy to have the Woodlander on anytime.
Haven't you had the Woodlander on?
I haven't, no. I've followed his channel for a long time now. And I like him very much. I'd be very happy to have the Woodlander on.
I thought you streamed with him already for some reason.
No, I haven't, but I'd love to. He'd be most welcome.
But yeah, the other thing as well with the whole tech bros and the merits thing, like, I mean, that'd be interesting to see in its own way, because if you generally in places like America, if you built a system that was actually meritocratic, it's going to end up being quite pro-white anyway. It's going to be quite pro-native stock anyway.
Yes.
You know, for certain reasons, but of course it wouldn't be if it was done by the tech bros. You know, I mean, we saw Elon Musk and that H1B argument on Christmas Day and going forwards.
But to be fair, Alaman, look what happened to what's his name, Vivek Swami. That wasn't it. That to me was Trump striking back against that a bit.
Yeah, I imagine he did that because there was like a sizable amount of backlash, but that's just what needs to happen. Like, you know, you get your guy in power. Obviously, your guy being some sort of aggrieved rogue elite, pushing back on the system in his own way. He's not strictly your guy. He's your guy because you've made him your guy, because you've empowered him, and you need to sort of keep that pressure on forever, essentially.
I like. Let's talk about Elon Musk for a minute. I like Elon Musk's going to Mars stuff. I'm really, really keen on that. One of the things I hope to see before I die is men landing on Mars and being able to come back. But I don't really like his transhumanism at all. You know,
no, because him and like Peter Thiel, for example, another one of these tech bros, he's obsessed with like extending human life, like the Methuselah project.
And that'll only be for the ultra rich, you can guarantee.
Yeah, and even then, it's kind of grotesque, the whole thing. You know, we were made this way for a reason. You know, you don't have to. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we're talking about Musk and the tech bros, because obviously I mentioned my stream of Semiagog, but Semiagog did bring up Musk and the PayPal Mafia as a kind of a new counter elite, and I'm very much seeing them as a kind of almost like a new Milner Group in a way. And it's interesting considering Musk is South African, that the Milner Group rose in South Africa, and now Elon Musk and the tech bros are almost like doing their own version of it in Trump's government. So it's the Milner Group were very much committed to this idea of imperial federation. So you have to wonder with them wanting to annex Canada, whether as an extension of that it'll end up being Trump's America that reunites the Anglosphere and that's some new like federal empire. But that's probably quite fantastical. I'm speculating, not predicting.
That would be interesting, actually. I am, as you guys know, a Kanzuk supporter, but in order for Kanzuk to make any sense, you have to have pretty right-wing based governments in Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. If you had that, I'd support Kanzuk totally.
That's what I'm
if
saying,
you had that, which of course we don't at the moment at all.
It's very possible you could, though, because obviously with Five Eyes, the intelligence sharing, and it's very possible that Trump and Musk could possibly pull off a series of coups and flip all the Anglosphere governments. I mean, we're talking about Germany. We're sort of seeing it in Germany. So who's to say it wouldn't happen? I mean, hasn't Australia got an election later this year anyway, ING?
Yes, but we've got no choice here. It's because the difference between the Liberals, who are our version of, in air quotes, the Conservatives, and the Labour Party is tiny. It's very much like the difference between the Labour Party in Britain and the so-called Conservatives under their Nigerian leader. There's no difference, really. There's no point in voting for either of them, and the same thing applies in Australia. But in Australia, we do not have an equivalent of reform, sadly.
Yeah. The only thing I'm implying, though, is, for example, because in Canada, as disgusting as the Canadian Tories are, they are at least somewhat trying to align with Trump somewhat. So I just wonder whether the Australian Liberals would do the same. So
maybe, but they come out with like woke shit all the time. The Liberals.
I'm more implying the fact that they're pretty Zionist, from my understanding, and Trump's got his whole carve out for Israel. So
look, I think you've got to take that as a given that an American president is going to be pro-Israel. I mean, the idea that they're not going to be is just not realistic at the moment. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but at the moment.
Well, no, I'm realistic. I expect it.
Yeah, so I don't even concern myself with that, because the idea that Trump would be anti-Israel is like impossible to imagine at the moment. Sad, but true. So that's my view on that, is that like if you're going to discount someone because they're in favor of Israel as the American president, well, you just as well give up on any American president we're likely to get in the next 20 years. So, unless they change the rules in America on Zionist lobby groups, which I don't see happening, because the people who control the people who change the rules are Zionists. So,
Well, this is gonna be kind of an interesting thing watching over the next 4 years, because I mean, you mentioned about AA's like contradictory position earlier. One of the things that I think AA's picked up from, I forget the name of the guys. Is it TRS, that podcast in America? Anyway, one of the things that I think some people have picked up from there.
Judge Knapp?
No. They're sort of quite far to the right of that.
Judge Knapp mostly has leftists on. I quite often agree with the stuff they say about Ukraine and Israel, but most of his guests are fairly left, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that some of the ideas that people have been picking up from some of these spaces is that like the ultimate goal is to deconstruct like the Israel lobby, or you could say bluish power. And I understand like where that comes from, but it's like another school of thought that some people have been pushing that were much more pro-Trump is that actually you just kind of have to work with those factions for a while. And I'm not really sure I'm particularly fond of that idea either, but it will be interesting to see over Trump's term which one comes good. Are the people that see Zionism as the ultimate enemy going to be redeemed, and are we going to get completely betrayed by this current Trump administration, or are the people that say that there can be some working together? Are they going to be redeemed? I don't know. Neither of those seem like they're particularly working strategies to me, but one is ultimately going to win out over the other.
I mean, one of the things that also has annoyed me from AA this week is the fact that because obviously one of Trump's executive orders was, something like banning it or whatever, or clamping down on anti-Semitism, and AA was like, aha, this is proof that, he's really captured by the Zionists and that he's a cuck. And I'm like, what the fuck? Have you not seen what Trump's done the past week? He has gone well beyond what any of us expected him to do. Like, I frankly don't give a damn if he wants to pass a executive order on anti-Semitism. He's done what his base wants. He's done what we all want, so it doesn't fucking matter. It's like, just because he does one thing, carve out for the Zionists, just look, if he completely betrayed his base on everything else, then yeah, you have a point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. I still don't know which way it's going to go. I kind of imagine that I think Trump's going to come good on the illegals, as he's been doing. It's going to kind of be interesting to see, like, is he going to be able to keep the momentum of the deportations? I'm not sure if we could say that word on YouTube. I imagine it's fine. Keep the momentum on that going all the way to the end of his term. If he does, I mean, it's still going to not be enough that he's gotten rid of. It will just be like setting it back one step. But then, of course, in that time, he's also going to be setting up like a disciple to follow on, which is JD Vance. And actually, I think in a lot of ways, JD Vance is even more a step in the right direction. I know that there's some issues with, like, his brown wife and various other things, but he's made statements that I know Mitch has talked about on this stream before about the UK, where it kind of where he was talking about, like, the UK basically becoming a Muslim country, and that, which kind of speaks to the sort of the doomerism that some people in that end of, like, the American right treat Europe with, which is not particularly accurate. I always just counter by saying, well, sort out Detroit first and then come and talk to me about London.
I mean, I actually thought Suella Braverman said the same thing this week. She said, oh yeah, Britain will become an Islamist country in 20 years. And it's like, listen, they're a problem, but they're never going to take over the government. Come on.
No. Yeah.
Well, not unless we let them anyway. But yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, that there is some risk from, like, let's say, I mean, when I said about meritocracy earlier, Al responded mentioning about their sort of ethnic blocks, and of course he's right. But we kind of have the same problem here. Like, Pakistanis are by and large taking over the entire sort of industry of law, as it were. I think like 90% of new barristers are Pakistani.
A lot of the Home Office too.
Yeah, but of course, and that's of course how it works. Like, they're not going to take over necessarily. It would actually be kind of ironic if they outed themselves for the morons that they really are, and tried to make sort of very strong, deliberate plays with power towards enfranchising actual privileges for their ethnic bloc, like explicit ones, because they don't have the numbers. They would very, very quickly come to an end.
Yeah, but Armin, look at the ads on British TV where 50% of the people, more than 50%, I would say sometimes, are ethnic immigrant minorities. The propaganda is there. I mean, even the trying to negate British history by pretending there were black people where there were none. I mean, basically, Britain had no black people until about 1948.
Well, sure, but there's like, I mean, I'll point out a time where we on this stream were ahead of the curve, right? There's been this point that people have been making recently about, I forget who started this off. I think it was a South African guy on a stream somewhere, but there was this point where people have said that like accelerationism doesn't work because you can look at South Africa and that's a point we've actually talked about on this stream like years ago.
We have. Yeah, I remember
About
doing
how
it.
about how that, like, you know, you can sit there and say about politics moving in a certain direction or people finally becoming red pilled, but there are like shit libs, white shit libs living in gated communities, gated to keep out like hordes of rapey, stabby Africans, usually sitting in the dark with candles in rolling blackouts, and they're still leftists, right? But of course, the difference is that in South Africa they are actually a minority. And they that changes their psychology and the way they view themselves in certain ways.
I have to say, like, obviously I'm an Engels man, as they would say in South Africa, and used to. But I have a great admiration for the Afrikaners because the best of them, not all of them, because the Afrikaners are like everybody else, they're a good, bad, and indifferent. But the best of them, people like Conscious Caracal on YouTube, people like that are really they're digging in and they're trying to fight back in the ways that they can realistically fight back. You know, you look at places like Oriana in the Cape, which is an Afrikaner town. They're doing really good stuff there. They really are. And I think they do have some lessons for us.
Yeah. But I mean, our situation is never going to be exactly like theirs because they are actually a minority fighting from a sort of like a, you know, like a sort of like a back foot position, whereas we're just kind of we are overwhelmingly still and will be for quite a while yet the majority, and instead we're just kind of sleepwalking.
It's our elites are anti our people. You know, someone like Keir Starmer detests and hates Anglo-Celtic people, basically, like average Anglo-Celtic people, unless they're extreme lefties like he is. He just hates them, despises them, and that's what we've got to realise in Britain.
Yeah, and of course, if a Keir Starmer was pushed aside to be replaced by, let's say, a cabinet that was entirely Pakistani, along with a legal structure that's entirely Pakistani, like, they're not going to make up police officers. Police officers are still overwhelmingly going to be white guys. And well, even if they're not, the difference is that they're still trying to. It's like Malays ruling over the various things that operate in their country. It's kind of not a working. It's not really a particularly good working system. It kind of works because
eventually leads to massacres, but
but not always in the way that they would be happy with. I mean, you can see it now.
Like absolutely. You know, but that's what I'm saying. When I say it leads to massacres, I'm not saying that the elites get their way. Eventually, people rebel.
Yeah, and it's like Nick Griffin used to have this argument, which I couldn't stand, where he used to go, "Oh, you know, let's say you wait until like 2066 or whatever. I mean, it'll be sooner than then, but it's not. You could go all the way into the 2080s. You could go to 2100 and you can still bring it back. It's not a big deal." But
well, you could, but then you're talking about like ultra violence. But yeah.
Admittedly, the sooner it gets fixed, the better. But they're not gonna. They will push it all the way. Like, you can see it with these local government changes. You know, they're not willing. They're too far gone. They're not willing to compromise in any way on their view at all. Partly because they've sold themselves this ideological truth that they, while sitting within government, are fighting against some system. You know, and that system needs to be transformed. That human nature needs to be drastically changed by any means necessary, and that anything short of that is literal fascism, or literal or ultimate evil to them. You know, they and so they won't surrender even an ounce of power. And to an extent, they're kind of right to do that. You know, I was joking with a friend the other day. I was saying, like, you know, you could turn around to these people and go, "Look, no, I'm warning you because you're in danger. Like, give up now, and step back a little bit of this, and people will let you off the hook. The joke is we're not letting them off the hook, right? But you know, but they're not willing to compromise. They're too afraid to do so. I think it will just continue this way for a long time, and they'll be so stupid that they will turn all these implicit realities that they've sort of created into explicit truths. At which point, people will kind of flip quite quickly. You know, people now already kind of do believe, a large amount of people, maybe not a majority, but a large amount of people do believe in stuff like two-tier, right? You know, two-tier justice system.
Yeah. Which is what we have. That is the British justice system.
But it's kind of said because it's just something they see elsewhere. It's kind of said with a sort of like a hint of irony, with a you know, a bit of a nudge, you know. The moment like it gets to the point where a lot of people kind of have like very close brushes with this stuff, and it becomes sort of an explicit reality, something that you're kind of told by some dour face school mom on the news is just your reality now.
Adam, and I will say this, right? Even if you'd have asked me in the 90s, right, I would have said that the British justice system, I wouldn't have said it was totally fair, because obviously the more money you've got, the better lawyers and barristers and what have you can get. So obviously it wasn't totally fair, but it was probably as fair as anyone else. Whereas I don't think that's true anymore at all. I think that's just gone totally out the window now. There is no fairness in the British justice system.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we've literally got examples. I saw another one just today. Not the same ones. This was a new one of a guy that said sort of mean things on Facebook or something like that. It was some sort of offensive post on Facebook, who got 38 months.
Wow.
Which is, you know, 3 years and 2 months. And then there was either a Pakistani or some sort of South Asian gentleman who had, I say gentleman, who had almost killed his, what they called sex worker. Obviously, potentially massive quotations around that.
Yeah.
And he got 2.5 years.
So he'll do less time than the person for the tweet.
Well, even worse than that, because of course he'll only do potentially as little as half of his time, because that's the law. But that doesn't count as much if you committed a hate crime. If you committed a hate crime, I think you still have to do a minimum of 2/3.
And yet, strange to say, the grooming gang crimes, or even Rudy Cabana, was
not seen as hate crimes.
Not as hate crimes. That's not a hate crime, even though Rudy Cabana said he wanted to kill white people.
Yeah.
And kill
in any other case,
little toddler girls.
Yeah. Not to bring up hypocrisy, because of course that's gay, but in any other case against any other group, that would have the fact that he'd mentioned that once in the past would be enough.
All right, I'll ask you, Alman and Hitman, and of course it's a rhetorical question, but if Rudy Cabana had been a white guy killing Pakistani girls, do you reckon he would have got done for a hate crime? Because I do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he would have. Yeah.
100% he would have. But
there'd be a BBC show about it in the making.
Oh, right now. The evil right-wing white guys.
Yeah, they wouldn't stop talking about it for at least a decade.
Yeah, it's... I don't know how stupid you have to be before you see this stuff. You know? You have to see this stuff. I've got a picture that I stole from John's Discord of a British lion asleep and this little blonde white British kid trying to wake him up on my Twitter. And I just think that's where we are at the moment. I really do. I think that's where we are.
Yeah, we probably need new imagery, though. That's the only problem.
I don't know. I think British lion, pretty good imagery.
Yeah, the thing is, it's kind of... I think if you inculcate some new spirit it will have to be under essentially new banners. The old ones are just a bit too. I think discredit is the wrong word, but they've kind of been dragged through the mud for so long that they're
it's
never,
a
they're
long
never going to come
way.
clean again.
Well, no,
Sorry, carry on, Hitman.
well, it's as Thomas Carlyle says, when you have this old decadent elite, they deserve to be overthrown. No redemption. You failed in your duties. The law of veracity is going to drive you out.
Yeah.
Fair enough, but I would just say the British Lion is a much pre-World War One thing. So I'm all in favour of stepping over World War Two, and to some degree, except for realising it was the original sin of Britain and the Empire, I'm in favour of stepping over World War One. So the stuff that I tend to promote is like traditional British 19th century and earlier. I'm not interested in 20th century stuff, and I don't do it. You won't see me doing Spitfires over the White Cliffs of Dover shit, because I don't.
I mean, I think the best you can hope for in regards to that is that you have you construct essentially a new regime that sort of rotates out these people and comes in, and it sort of tries to model itself on the old Britain, but it's not the old Britain. Kind of in the way that certain regimes have modeled themselves on Rome over the years, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Armin. But I don't think we should chuck out the baby with the bathwater. I think there was a lot of good British myth and history and imagery that is like 19th century and earlier that we can happily use. My objection is when people just want to use, especially World War II shit, but even anything in the 20th century, I'm not all that keen on, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well,
because it mostly was globalist.
Well, one thing I'd like to add is this idea of getting a new regime. One figure who I think we could take some inspiration from now. This individual wasn't perfect, so I wouldn't do everything that they did, but I think it's a good example is actually Ataturk, the first president of Turkey, because what he did is he took the crushed remnants of the Ottoman Empire and he reforged it into a new national state. And I don't agree with his militant secularism, and I don't agree with some of his language reforms, like completely changing the Turkish language. But I think some of the core of what he did, which is you create a national state for your people, the Turks, for us to be the British, and and he was largely an isolationist. He didn't get involved in any wars. He wanted strong frontiers, and he just didn't get involved in any other crap. I want to make a state that serves the interest of the people, and okay. So as I said, we don't have to copy everything he did. Again, wouldn't do the secularism or some of the weird westernization stuff he did. But I think having a highly respected, successful military leader implementing a nation state where you actually serve the interests of the people is what we need.
Well, I think it's a pity that the Brits and Australians didn't kill him in Gallipoli, but apart from that, yeah, I agree with you. But
well, yeah, I'm
a Brit who lives in Australia. I'm not a Turk, so. But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And also, I watched Midnight Express when I was a young and impressionable man. So.
Well, in fairness to Ataturk, obviously there's that Gallipoli Memorial, which is in Australia and at Gallipoli. So, yeah,
there is. Oh, look, I mean, the thing is, I like Blood Pasha, which is your avatar, Hitman. And I like the dude who AI is doing the streams on the Strange Death of the British Empire. But
Major Hillary.
Yeah, that's right. But both of those guys were to some extent British Arabists, I guess you'd say. I don't know if Hitman would agree with me.
Well, Gleb was certainly an Orientalist. He certainly was interested and did sympathise with the Arabs. But yeah, I don't think that's unfair. Richard Hilton, I'm not so sure about.
I think he was too, to some degree. But I may be wrong about that. AI will have to tell me. But yeah, it's like all of these people. I mean, it's a bit like what you guys were just saying. We can't just copy the past, but I do think you can go back into the 19th and 18th century and the 17th century and beyond. Right back to King Alfred the Great, if you like, and we can take inspiration from all those things. And to me, the British lion symbol is a symbol that was of Britain, like long before the First World War, let alone the Second World War. In fact, it wasn't used much in the Second World War at all. So that's why I'm happy to use that.
Just to address a comment from Sunny Jim, no, the language was completely revolutionized because changing a script doesn't just change hardly anything. It completely, because the old Turkish language used so much Arabic loan words, so many words were just lost when the new script was adopted, and many old Turkish literature was just lost or destroyed as a result. It was a cultural travesty.
I'm never going to spell Turkey's name the way they want you to spell it now, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's silly. But one thing I would say...
It's like changing Beijing from Peking. I mean, it's crap.
Yeah,
I still refer to it as Peking.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah, but just of this idea of language, I mean, you've got these people who believe, we need to adopt English, we need to purge English of all the Latinate words, and I'm just thinking, you do realize if you did that, you would completely destroy the works of William Shakespeare, because it would just become incomprehensible. So we have to be sensible about these things.
Oh, look, I love Mitch and his Old English stuff. I find it very interesting. I don't think we can change back to that. I'm not even sure we should. I mean, the English is like, to me, it's the best language in the world because you could be so precise. I don't think there's another language in the world where you can be so precise. If you've got a good vocabulary, you can be so precise about what you're saying. So whilst I'm very fond of Mitch and his Old English crusades and the fact that he understands Old English and Middle English and all this stuff, I think it's great, but I don't think we should return to that.
Well, again, I'm completely fine to learn about the origins of language. It's I think what helps you have a national identity as a people. But yeah, there are such things which I think are too silly. Like to be proper English, we have to purge our language of most of the words it uses.
Well, not most, but yeah, there's a lot of Greek and Latin words in English. For sure.
Well, no, but English is only 1/3 Germanic, so the English people want to purge everything that's not Germanic. So that's about 2/3 of the language and words.
Is it is it that high?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
The Germanic is only 33% of the words. I think French is 1/3 and Latin is 1/4, and then the rest is
there are also quite a lot of Danish, aren't there?
Well, that's what I mean by Germanic. So that Anglo-Saxon.
Oh, okay. So that would count in that, would it? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not a lingo expert, guys, as you can obviously tell. So, yeah. But I don't know. What do we think of Trump in his first 2 weeks?
I think he's played a blinder.
Agreed. What do you think, Alan?
I think, I agree. I think one of the things that, not to bring up the Zionism thing again, but one of the things that really surprised me was before he even took office, his stance on Israel, where he sent his envoy over, and the guy met with Netanyahu on a Saturday and wouldn't change the day, and he sort of immediately pushed for this ceasefire, which saw all these Israelis claiming that he was on the
Yeah.
side of Palestine, basically a Hamas fighter.
Yeah.
It kind of that before he'd even taken office, I was like, oh, hang on a minute, has he actually learned even more lessons than I'd hoped from his first term? And then he just comes in swinging. It was really great to see. You know, I mean, obviously there's a few little things here and there. You know, he kind of talks like your nominally right-wing boomer granddad, which isn't a bad thing. But obviously he's got
Because
some.
he is that to some
Yeah,
degree.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna have some ideological limitations because of that, but he's done really well despite it. He's done way better than I expected, significantly so.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I was hoping for him to do a couple of things, and he did those and more.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see going forward. And I mean, it's kind of, I mean, we have a few Americans in chat, and obviously it matters to them a lot more. I mean, to us, this is kind of theatre over there. We can just kind of watch and observe and see what works and what doesn't. But
And be embarrassed about how bad we are relative to the stomach. But
yeah.
Which I hate, by the way. I like feeling inferior to Americans really gets on my tits, to be honest. But
yeah. Well, there was an American on Twitter over this whole Rory Stewart and JD Vance thing where he was kind of taking the mick out of Rory Stewart, and he said like, oh, you know, there's nothing more annoying than like this sort of midwit.
A gay Scotsman.
Well, he was like this midwit Brit who likes to hold himself because he's British above far cleverer Americans. And I couldn't disagree. I can't disagree at all. Like I find that. I mean, obviously, I've got a bit of a streak of an anti-Americanism in me that I've talked about on this stream before. But I find the way like Brits will go like about like the gun stuff in America or about like the racism stuff in America. I just find it horrible to listen to. I just hate that. Yeah, I hate that these are my people. Yeah, it's cringe, and they should know better. But
mate, Adamant, I totally agree with you, and that's exactly how I feel. I mean, look, when I lived in South Africa, I had a 5.56 rifle in a locked cabinet in my house, and I went everywhere with a 9mm pistol. Americans can mostly do that.
Yeah,
and we should be able to do that too, to be honest. And you would find street crime would die off very quickly.
Yeah,
it just would.
Yeah, I mean, being a modern guy, I can kind of take the gun stuff or leave it, but I often do defend the idea of like gun rights to people. And
look, if you kill someone for no reason, you should be arrested, tried, and whatever happens. But there's no reason why law-abiding people should not be able to have guns.
Yeah, well, yeah, and when I bring it up, I get accused of being obsessed with like American gun culture. And it's like, well, it's not American gun culture. We had our own gun culture. Like, the Times, about the time that the first James Bond film was coming out, I know this for a fact. The Times had a gun column. Just think how mad that is compared to today's standards. You know, one of Britain's most read newspapers has a column just about firearms and shooting.
Read the Sherlock Holmes stories written between the late 1880s and the 1920s. Sherlock Holmes or Dr. Watson very often take their pistol to crimes.
Yeah.
Because in those days, you could have a pistol. It was entirely legal. You couldn't shoot people with it for no reason.
No.
But you could defend yourself with it.
Yeah, and there's a picture, and it's in colour, which shows how recent it was. I haven't been able to find it again, but there is this infamous picture of a guy walking through Piccadilly Circus with 2 wheel guns, just carrying them in his hands. Walking to a shooting range. And he's walking past people eating outside a cafe, and just no one's batting an eye.
I'll give you another one, Adam. The term swashbuckler, you know, you'll say a Errol Flynn swashbuckler movie, you know? That was an English guy who wore a little small shield that you could wear on your belt called a buckler and had a sword.
Yeah.
And all Englishmen were like that. In
Yeah.
Shakespeare's time, for example, all Englishmen used to go to the pub equipped in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and people will say to you, they'll go like, "Oh, you just want to have this fantasy of fighting off home invaders with an AR-15. It's like replace it with a side-by-side Holland and Holland." And yes, actually, you're right.
Yeah.
I'll don my barber coat.
100, mate, 100. But yeah, it's just insanity. The idea that you may not have firearms or weapons generally, it doesn't apply if you have a high trust Anglo-Celtic society. It never did.
Yeah, and of course,
It's
even if
only
you take American gun crime, yeah, and you can, if you take just US whites, they're actually a safer community than places like Austria or
yeah,
Finland in terms of firearms
they're
homicides.
quite close to Norway or somewhere like
Yeah.
that. If you're just talking about American white guys,
Mm.
their amount of gun crime murders, if you just count American white people, they're somewhere close to Norway.
Mm. And again, it's just the I mean, gun crime, gun laws, I think, started to be rolled out in this country more in response to political upheavals in the post-war period, where they didn't want people to kick off too badly. But and they had this massive surplus of people that were military veterans and were armed. But obviously, it's been continued and massively ramped up because of these sorts of various ethnic groups that they've imported en masse, and it's just totally unnecessary if those people weren't here.
Yeah, I mean, we can say Britain doesn't have a knife problem; it has a mass third world immigration problem. Equally, America doesn't have a gun problem; it has a third world mass immigration problem, and also to some degree American blacks. But
Yeah.
I mean, I did a tweet yesterday, I think, where I pointed out that many American blacks have ancestors in America since well before 1800, and yet only a very small minority of American blacks are really integrated into mainstream American society. They're doctors, they're lawyers, there's this sort of thing. It's a small number, or they're guys who are like foremen in firms and stuff. It's a relatively small number. But on the other hand, in Britain, there were almost no black people whatsoever before 1948 at the very earliest. Integration is just a lie. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
220 years it doesn't work, let alone 50 years,
Yeah, integration only works when the scale is so small that it's barely worth mentioning.
If you've got 1,000 white guys and you have one or two black people, they might integrate eventually. They really might. But if you go any higher than that, it won't happen because they'll all go and live together and they'll just not do that.
I think this is also why, the miscegenation point is kind of not worth talking about. Obviously, I don't like it, but I also think
it, but it's also not very common either.
No, it's so rare, and if you got rid of all the others, the amount that would be left would just sort of dissolve into the broader ethnos, because it is so small.
This was the other thing I was going to ask you guys, and it was an argument I had on another Discord, not on ours, where apparently, according to the person I was arguing with, who is relatively well known, I suppose, was saying that being racist is bad. Okay, now I would argue that all humans of every single color, race, and creed are more or less racist, because that's been my experience traveling around the world. And I've been at 50 odd countries, and I've lived on 3 continents. But this dude was trying to say, yeah, but you shouldn't be racist. And I don't really agree with that. I just don't think it's right. I'd be interested to know what you dudes think about that.
Well, I mean, it's like racism's kind of like the civic nationalism thing. Like it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not really a real thing. Like I like to, when I'm talking to people like that, I like to keep referring to it as in-group preference.
Yep.
In-group versus out-group preference.
Yep.
And inevitably, when they're on the back foot, they'll try to get you in the racism trap, where they go, "Oh, you just mean racism," at which point you just point out that all groups have this. Basically, whites have the least amount of it, because, of course, racism is a word only. It's basically created purely to be used against whites.
Well, it was made up by the Soviet Communist Party, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was
Leon
coined
Trotsky.
a little bit before that. Was it actually Trotsky?
Yeah, it was Trotsky.
Yeah, I think it was him, man. Yeah, thank you. I believe so.
But yeah, and so it's like, yeah, it's got kind of like, I remember I brought this up in the office, because these women in the office were talking about how it was International Women's Day, whenever that was. And I brought up about how when International Women's Day was first sort of rolled out, they used it as cover to invade the Tsarist palace in St. Petersburg, and of course it was guarded that day by an all-women unit, which were veterans from the First World War, and they sort of they were particularly horrific to them. So it's just kind of this horrific irony that they used literally created this International Women's Day as cover to go in and do brutal, horrific things to this women's guard in the Tsar's palace.
Torture is what you're probably talking about there, but
yeah, something basically along those lines.
Yeah, no, to me it's insanity. Like, if someone calls me racist, I laugh and go, and
yeah,
really. I mean, all right. I don't work for a company, so I can do that. If you work for a company, you have to really be a little bit more careful. But I'm sorry, calling me racist is not going to stop me talking about what I talk about, because I don't consider being racist all that bad. I just don't. I'm sorry. Because Zulus are racist. Like, Zulus are racist against other African tribes. They're very racist against Indians. If you go to Japan or China, you find those guys are racist against loads of people. And again, don't really care. They're probably right. You know, we have to stop. And as Hitman rightly said, this is a word that was made up by Trotsky, a Soviet arsehole, who was later killed by that other Soviet arsehole, Stalin. Why do we care about these leftist terms? If someone calls you racist, you should laugh. Sorry. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, they would say that they would say none of those groups are racist, because to them racism is just something white people do ultimately.
Oh yeah, if you go with the definition, the communist definition of racist,
yeah,
only white people can be racist. So in a way, the very word itself is anti-white racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I've got, if someone calls me racist, I laugh and I say, and really, it's absolutely ridiculous, and we should stop taking any notice of it on the right, because it's a way to try and corral people. And if we ignored it and just laughed, you know, and some ridiculous Labour lesbian calls you a racist, why would you care? Why would you care?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to, because it can cost you things like your job. But
now, yeah, Adam,
yeah.
I totally agree with you.
So it's. I mean, I
Yeah.
generally don't know how to take it. Like, you know, I kind of want to be the same and just laugh it off and say, but at the same time, I suppose it depends on where and when.
You've got to use common sense,
Yeah.
obviously, at the moment, because we live in. I don't know. Look, I think Britain today is much more like, it's probably a worse version of Nazi Germany in 1936 now. I actually think the Nazis were less bad with their own people than Britain is in 2025. I think Starmer is far worse than Hitler. Far worse.
Well, I mean, Starmer is the inverse of Mustache Man, where the Führer saw himself acting in the interest of the German people. Starmer absolutely does not act in the interest of the British people.
No, he sees himself as the hammer of the British people. He wants to destroy the Anglo-Celtic real British people. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that, so when they call you racist, like Starmer and that ugly lesbian who is the deputy prime minister and all the rest of these people, and the dumbest British foreign secretary there's ever been, and all the rest of it, I just look at those people and think that's Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, or it's Stalin and the Soviets, because that's who they remind me of.
I mean, maybe Stalin if you're Polish, but
yeah, but they're not good guys. You know.
I think there's probably better analogies though for the modern Labour, although maybe there isn't. I mean,
I don't know who else could you go with.
Well,
I mean,
at least most of those regimes.
I mean, Chairman.
But
you could go Chairman Mao. You could go Pol Pot. I don't know who else, to be honest.
I mean, a lot of those regimes, especially the German one, they were usually quite upfront about where they stood on their positions. Whereas this government, you know, like they've thrown people in prison, right, for memes on Facebook, which every one of my older relatives has posted at one point or another. So it's like, and they've thrown people in prison for saying things that half of my office have said at one point or another. And you try and explain this to people, and it kind of just goes over their head. They almost don't realize how ridiculous that is. And it's like, it's actually the case that the British regime, its eyes are bigger than its stomach. It's not capable of actually exercising all the authority it actually kind of wants to. You know, they've kind of sold you a police state without police, as it were. And they've actually got these beliefs that they've got this sort of moral grandstanding that would see them literally lock up half the country, and they haven't even got the prison capacity for the people they have locked up already.
So they're spending all the budget on the NHS.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
I mean,
you two could have
Britain is a state with an NHS. Sorry, an NHS with a state, I should say. So it's like, it's insane. The amount of money you waste on that.
You two could have an Orwellian police state for only 1 week of NHS spending.
Yeah. Which is so much money that we could send people to the moon 3 times for that 1 week of NHS spending. And
I do wonder.
That's the truth, by the way. But yeah.
So I do wonder if we do get like a second glorious revolution and like Trump just makes Musk the ruler of Britain, whether like Musk would do his own UK version of Doge, and Doge would be like, inefficiency detected in the NHS, delete NHS.
Oh, for God's sake, please.
I mean, you kind of wonder, like with the police, like if you had any sort of efficiency unit that came in and made, let's say, the police force more efficient, they would just get more efficient at tyrannizing the native population. Like, probably the only thing saving us is the fact that it's just full of DEI hires and spasticated, low IQ officers. But otherwise, we would probably all be in pretty deep trouble. But it is what it is.
Totally agree. I mean, I do agree. I mean, I think that like all of the mass immigrants that are running the British civil service these days. That's our saving grace, is because they're not high IQ individuals. Geralt of Rivia says, could we have Horace on to do Weimar? I invited Horace on this evening. Horace can come on the stream anytime he wants to. He's also in my Discord. So
Did you invite him on Discord? Because I know he doesn't pop on Discord very often.
No, I invited him on X.
Oh, okay.
But maybe he wants to do a special stream. I don't know. But because he put up the stream I did with him ages ago, and I said, "Look, mate, you can come on my stream anytime you like." And so then I invited him, but I still haven't found out why Mitch didn't join us this evening. But I'll hopefully find out after the stream on Discord. Anyway, I don't know. I do think we're being saved by the inefficiencies of the DEI hires, for sure. But nonetheless, I'm still embarrassed to be British at the moment compared to America. And I don't like that at all, to be honest. I like to feel slightly superior to Americans. And at the moment, I can't because of Starmer.
Yeah.
Who hates the real Anglo-Celtic British people with a passion, obviously. And eventually we'll find out why. I'm sure he's gay and all the other stuff. But, you know.
Do you think he had to pay Lord Lee back for that suit in other ways?
100%. I'm absolutely certain of that, yeah.
I still don't know what that was about. Why? And the thing is, as well, like Lord Lee, spent like 30 grand on suits for him, and he still looks like shit. Like, what's that about? Like, I don't.
He was his boyfriend, I guess.
Yeah, that money definitely wasn't all going on suits.
Adamant, if you have a girl, you know, and she's really cute, yeah, buy her stuff because you want her to look even cuter, don't you? And you know, I'm
you
sure
buy her stuff that fits, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, what's going to fit a strange person like Starmer? Not much, really. And if you're attracted to someone like Starmer, I would question your sanity. But
I don't think Lord Ali's necessarily attracted. I just think he's got Starmer as his, you know what?
Oh yeah, his use in the corner thing. Yeah, probably. Starmer kneels down in the corner, and every time Lord Ali wants to, and there's our Prime Minister.
I can't stay on much longer, but Aubrey mentioned in chat quite a while back, were we going to talk about this airline crash in America?
Oh, she did. I'm sorry, you're right, and we should. All right.
I don't know much about it, though. I'm going to be honest.
Someone said,
yeah, she mentioned, and I saw a picture of this on Twitter, but I haven't verified it, that the pilot of the helicopter was a woman. But beyond that, I literally know nothing about it.
All right. The first thing I'd say, sorry, Hitman. First thing I'd say is there was a report that the pilot was a transgender bloke pretending to be a woman. But I checked on that and it wasn't true. The transgender thing is still alive and tweeting. So it wasn't that. I think the pilot was a woman. Whether it was a biological woman or not, I don't know. Everything I have seen so far about that crash is that the helicopter should have been at 200 feet and was closer to 400 feet. So it was probably the helicopter pilot's fault.
I mean, I'm just going to say, if it was a troon, it'd probably be able to fly properly.
Oh, well, look, you know, if you're a troon, you're mentally ill, so you probably shouldn't be flying military aircraft. That's my
You're also a bloke.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You're mentally ill. So if you're a bloke pretending to be a woman, probably shouldn't be allowed to fly military aircraft or civilian aircraft.
Yeah.
You know, you probably shouldn't be allowed to fly. because you're mentally ill. But everything I've seen so far, and I don't know if the pilot was a troon or not, everything I've seen so far is the military helicopter was almost 200 feet higher than it should have been on that route. And that's basically why the collision happened. Although, I would question why you need to do routine helicopter flights that close to a major airport. I just don't know why you need to. Especially at night. Why do you need to do that? You need a few helicopter pilots who can do that, for the special forces and what have you. But you don't need many, and they should be like the most experienced people you got. As far as I can work out, this pilot was on a check flight. They had about 500 hours in a Black Hawk, and they were being watched by an instructor pilot who had more than twice as that many hours, but they were 200 feet too high, which is strange, if you ask me. But they were not this troon that some people posted on Twitter and other places, because that particular thing is still alive. So there you go.
Aubrey said, oh, sorry, Hitman, go on.
Sorry, because the OGC covered the story, and something they've urged people is to be very careful with the information, because there's a lot of like conspiratarding that's going on. They did confirm the pilot was a woman, but yeah, all the stuff about the troon and other stuff is like, just don't conspiratard out. You just make us all look bad. What they have said is they are pretty certain that this is DEI related, because I think something got shared that regarding air traffic controllers or pilots in general, like under Obama, a bit like the Equality Act in this country, he enacted something similar. So like all this stuff where obviously you can't have somebody who's mentally ill or physically like ill or disabled in a role like that. He removed a lot of restrictions on those kind of jobs. So it's like, oh great, fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Aubrey said in chat that the air traffic control was really bad. I actually used to, I shouldn't admit this, but I used to make money by buying stocks in various aeroplane manufacturer companies after plane crashes.
What?
When I was in like a decade ago.
Wow.
I would, if there was a particularly big crash and you'd see, let's say, Airbus stock would dip, but you'd look and like the underlying information coming out of Airbus was still good. It was still a perfectly fine company, and those stocks would recover. So I'd go and buy stocks in it and wait for the bounce back. And that doesn't actually work nowadays, though. I mean, I stopped it a while back, but that doesn't actually work at all now, because there's not tremendous amounts more crashes, but there does just seem to be a general sort of like level of fatalism in the sort of air travel space, to the point where air crashes don't affect company stocks at all anymore when they do happen. And of course, when you look, there's like, there may not be many more crashes, but there's tons more near misses, especially in America.
67 people killed in that crash,
Yeah.
And I watched one husband who was texting his wife, who was saying, "Oh, we'll be in 10 minutes." And then the rest of the text didn't go through. 67 people killed. From what I can see, and we'll get the investigation, the helicopter pilot was almost 200 feet higher than they should have been. If she'd been at 200 feet, and apparently it was a she, whether it was a real she or a con she, who knows at this stage, but they should have been at 200 feet. And if she'd have been at 200 feet, the airliner would have just gone over her. And all those 67 people would still be alive.
Yeah, there was
I've also seen Aubrey said that there were not enough traffic controllers on that night, which could also be true. I don't know.
There was an article I read a while back. I can't remember where it was, if it was in like City Journal or something like that, and it was about DEI hires in pilots positions, and they were saying that a lot of these people getting hired to be pilots, and I'm sure it's the same in air traffic control as well. We're all getting like sent off to essentially work, because so many of them couldn't pass the test to go on and be commercial airline pilots, so they would get like halfway in, and then they would just sort of go and work for FedEx, flying freight and cargo around. And they some of these stories that they were going through, like the transcripts from black boxes from these crashes, were absolutely horrific. Like one was this black guy, and the plane got into some sort of dive, and he didn't know what to do to rectify it, so he just sort of like prayed in the cockpit as the plane went down. It's just really, really bleak stuff, and that's just like most of the air industry now. It's pretty bad.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'd just say Steve says one reason the military fires that particular route is to evacuate the national leadership in an emergency. Well, my guess would be that if you were really doing that, right, you'd want to fly at like 100 feet, not the 200 feet, which is the limit, or the 300 to 400 feet that the Black Hawk pilot was actually flying. You know, if you really wanted to evacuate Trump and all the main military and political guys, you'd probably try and do that at 100 feet, which a helicopter can easily do. You wouldn't be at 300 to 400 feet, which is where that pilot was, is all I'd say about that. Anyway, sorry, Armin, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, it's all right. I don't remember what I was saying, but yeah, it's. Oh yeah, no, it's a Time article. I just found it. Wait, is this it? Oh, I don't know. But yeah, either way, like I mean, you can see this here in the UK as well. Like British Airways. I mean, British Airways is terrible now. I mean, they openly boast that they have all black flight crews now. So I basically only fly with foreign airlines now, like specifically non-anglophone airlines.
I specifically remember a BA ad from a few years ago, and it was them just showing off like this male flight attendant wearing like makeup, and it was a non-white male flight attendant as well in like makeup, and it's like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, and I'm related to Freddie Laker, so every time I go for an airport or something, people are always asking me, and I'm like, yep, I'm here having to pay to fly on the people that crushed my relative's competition, and now just flying these shit barges in the sky.
Well, it was an Air National Guard pilot, right? So it wasn't a regular pilot.
Yeah.
I watched a few videos about this. I watched one where a regular American Coast Guard guy, helicopter pilot, former helicopter pilot, said what he thinks happens is that the crew were told to look out for an aircraft, and they didn't see the aircraft they were supposed to look out for. They saw the next one that was coming into that. And that's how the accident happened, which I can well believe. But I still have to wonder, because the radar stuff shows that the helo pilot was over 300 feet up when it should have only been 200 feet at maximum. So I don't know. Well, maybe find out eventually, but whatever. I don't think DEI is good. And I don't think most women are good drivers. So does that make them good helicopter pilots or good fast jet pilots? I doubt it, to be honest. If they can't drive SUVs very well, which most of them can't. So, whatever. That's my view. Anything else from you, Alman or Hitman?
No, nothing from me.
No, nothing for me.
Anything you wanted to plug, Alman?
No.
Hitman, plug your channel, mate.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I have a weekly stream on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. GMT called the Archival Discourses. Usually it's me, or usually sometimes I have guests, either reading through like an article or a chapter from a book, or even sometimes watching some videos, so various different topics. I also do other longer in-depth streams, like today I did the finale of my series called the Chatham House version with my friend Hunger, looking at the work of Middle East scholar Eli Kaduri. So if you're interested in that, give that a watch. Also, next week, I'm actually launching channel memberships on my channel. So for $2.99, you can become a channel member and get access to some paywall content I'm going to be having on the channel. So if you want to support me, you can do that as well.
Yeah, cool. I would recommend Hitman's channel. It's good. He does some good stuff on there. He's a good historian dude. So yeah, go and check him out. We were supposed to be on X tonight. I don't know why we weren't. If anyone knows why we weren't, then send me a DM on X, or if you're in the Discord, talk to me on the Discord. I would like to do simul streams on X as well as YouTube, because apart from anything else, that would mean if YouTube gets rid of us, we're still on X. So yeah, that would be cool. I do have a plan this year, boys, and it's to start a regular weekly history stream. It'll be Old Commonwealth history, so mostly Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or maybe South Africa. I'd like to start that this year. My plan is to do that in March, probably midweek. But if you are a potential guest and you don't want to do midweek, then please let me know. So yeah, I agree, by the way, Aubrey Ali. Male feminists are the worst. The most rapists are male feminists. But anyway, there we go. So yeah, guys, I think that's our stream for this week. We'll be back next week. Davey is saying, can I do the War of 1812? I want to do that, and I will do it on the history stream. But yeah, it's a war Britain didn't lose, actually. But anyway, certainly didn't lose, mainly thanks to the Royal Navy. But yeah, as always, I'm going to play us out with a tune. Okay, that was the MIDI from Patriotic Archive. Patriotic Archive is a friend of the channel, member of my Discord, and a MIDI is Royal Navy speak for a midshipman who was basically a young trainee officer. So there you go. All right, guys. Thank you very much to my guests, Alman and Hitman. Do go and check out Hitman's channel. We'll be back next week with Splendid Isolation 208. Hopefully with Mitch, I hope. And in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down. Go well, folks.
Yeah,
Go
good
on.
night all.